Mini Test 1. 1. Imagine that you decided to subscribe to a popular magazine. There are 3 offers listed on its website. The first is an online-only subscription for $50 a year. The second is a print-only subscription for $90. But the third offer is quite surprising. For the same price of $90, you can get an online and print subscription. At first, you might think it doesn't make any sense. But the marketer's strategy is to get you to buy the online and print subscription rather than the cheaper online-only one. Since consumers judge prices on their comparative value, the third option seems to have a real advantage in relation to the first two. Therefore, it comes across as the logical choice. 2.
Progesterone is a hormone found in women which reduces stress and anxiety and facilitates social bonding. A recent experiment demonstrated that engaging in social activities such as talking can increase the levels of progesterone in women. First, the subjects were divided into 2 groups. Next, members of the first group were directed to ask each other questions in order to get to know one another. The other group's members were assigned the individual task of editing an essay on botany. After 20 minutes of these activities, progesterone levels in all subjects were measured. Compared to their hormone levels prior to the experiment, those in the first group showed either stability or an increase, while those in the second group actually showed a decline in progesterone.
3. In the past, news reporters were usually very diligent about identifying the sources of information they presented. Recently, though, I've noticed a troubling trend. Reporters are neglecting their duties to the public, choosing to keep their sources anonymous. Of course, in some cases this is called for, as when quoting a whistleblower about corruption in his or her organization. National security stories may also require a source to remain anonymous. But I'm talking about general, everyday news stories in which the sources of statements and information aren't provided. Today's reporters overuse phrases like "experts say" and "according to politicians." I want to know who the experts and the politicians are. If I'm to believe something I read in the newspaper, I need to know who said it. 4.
I'm sure you've been assaulted by a boom car before. This is the name given to vehicles that drive around blasting more than 150 decibels from their stereo systems. They shake your windows, rattle your picture frames, and disturb even the deepest of sleepers. Studies show that the average boom car produces sounds that can be heard up to a mile away, which suggests their purpose is more to annoy people than to entertain them. Moreover, boom cars are a hazard. They damage the hearing of people in the car and distract the attention of drivers on the road around them. Our lawmakers must address this problem by banning loud stereo systems in vehicles.
'Mini Test 2. 1. Epsom salts are composed of natural minerals extracted from water. They have many domestic applications and are relatively inexpensive, so they are a common product in homes. Healing and cleansing are the main purposes for which Epsom salts are used. They can treat bruises and minor muscle strains, and they're also useful for cleaning the skin when made into a paste with water and applied to the face. Most people, however, prefer to use Epsom salts in the bath. Add 2 cups of Epsom salts to a tub of hot water, and the natural minerals will soothe your nerves and restore your well-being. 2.
According to a study, statistics show that traffic tickets are sometimes used by local governments to make up for a lack of funds. After studying 14 years of data, the researchers found that the number of traffic tickets issued would generally go up the year after there was a drop in revenue. The researchers came up with the formula that a revenue drop of 1% equaled a 0.32% increase in traffic tickets the next year. Many drivers may have already suspected that road safety wasn't always the only motivation behind a police officer's decision to give a ticket, and now this study seems to confirm that belief.
Three.
I finally got my first part in a movie, and I went to the hairdresser's in a light mood. I loved feeling the summer breeze blow through my long straight hair, but I knew I had to get it curled and cut short to play my character in the movie. When I told my hairdresser what I wanted to do, he was surprised but said okay. I didn't tell him the reason for the new hairdo because I wanted to keep the big news of my first ever movie role a secret before the first shooting began. I sat, eagerly flipping through the dog-eared pages of the movie script, studying my lines. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was the director. "Sorry, Julia, the project's been canceled." The hairdresser held up a mirror for me to see my short, curly hair, but all I wanted was to cry.
Four. The British manufacturer Ariel has been building automobiles since 1898. It is a very small car company, and it makes a very small car, the Atom 2. But despite its size, the Atom 2 has enough horsepower and handling to impress any car enthusiast. Its ingenious design includes nothing that isn't absolutely necessary. There are no doors, roof, or windshield. It has a trunk, but it's barely big enough to fit a suitcase in. As for performance, the Atom 2 is quite amazing. It is easy to control at even the fastest speeds and can accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.9 seconds if you can manage to shift through all 6 gears quickly enough. Mini Test 3. 1. In a scientific experiment, subjects drank alcohol through a straw while lying in an MRI scanner. The scanning results showed that the alcohol quickly traveled to their heads. Within 6 minutes of drinking the equivalent of 3 bottles of beer, changes in their brain cells were already taking place. One of these changes was that the brain began to use the sugar in the alcohol for energy, rather than glucose as it normally does. This caused beneficial substances in the brain's cells to decrease, while the alcohol level increased. The experiment showed that these shifts in concentrations generally returned to normal the next day. 2.
The above graph shows the types of activities selected by volunteers on a daily basis, based on data provided by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Teaching and counseling was the most common type of activity among men, while women were most likely to attend meetings or conferences. Cleaning and maintenance work was the least common type of activity among women, performed by slightly more than 5% of female volunteers. Nearly twice the percentage of men, on the other hand, took part in cleaning and maintenance work activities. The smallest percentage of men participated in activities that involved food preparation, and this number was less than half the percentage of women. The final category, organizing and preparing, was selected by roughly the same percentage of men and women.
3. The term cockpit originally referred to an actual pit in the ground where trained roosters, also called cocks, would fight one another. This brutal practice, known as cockfighting, originated in ancient China and eventually spread to Europe. By the 16th century, the word cockpit was being used in the English language. In the 1700s, people began to use it to describe any area where combat took place, such as traditional battlefields. Later, during World War I, pilots adopted the term to describe the small, uncomfortable area in their fighter planes in which they were confined. In modern English, a cockpit refers to the area of an airplane used by the pilots and flight crew. Although today's cockpits are much larger and more luxurious than in the past, the word is still commonly used. 4.
Clever and cute, cats are beloved by people around the world. That's why, in the 1960s, the CIA decided they would make perfect spies. Who would suspect a cat of working for the government? After choosing a female cat, doctors placed a tiny transmitter in her chest, along with a microphone in her ear and an antenna running along her backbone. Performing the operation was not that difficult. But then came the hard part, training the cat. Anyone who has ever owned a cat knows how stubborn they are. However, after 5 years of training, the CIA concluded their animal agent was ready. So, they sent her to record a conversation between two men from the Soviet Union. Sadly, the cat was hit by a passing taxi after taking only a few steps. The experiment was a total failure.
Mini-test 4. 1. Long ago, Sisyphus saw a giant eagle fly down to a young woman and carry her away to a distant island. Later, he discovered that the eagle was actually Zeus. When Sisyphus told the woman's father what he had seen, he was accused of betraying Zeus's secret. For that crime, Zeus punished Sisyphus by sending him to Hades and making him roll a large rock up a steep hill. As soon as he reached the top, the rock slipped from Sisyphus's grasp. Ever since that time, Sisyphus has been trying to roll it back up the hill. 2.
While almost all objects are simply called it in English, boats are generally referred to as she. Some believe this is because boats are typically given female names, traditionally the name of the boat owner's wife or mother. It has also been suggested that in ancient times, all ships were dedicated to goddesses. But another theory points out the fact that English once had a system of grammatical gender, similar to that found in Latin-based languages such as French and Spanish. Although this system was abandoned long ago, a few words have kept their gendered pronouns. And in most Latin-based languages that use a grammatical gender system, the word for ship is feminine. This would explain the continued use of feminine pronouns when referring to boats in English.
3. A long-term study was conducted to compare the effects of sign language and verbal language on the development of infants. The researchers began by dividing 11-month-old babies into two groups. The first was taught simple sign language, while the second received only verbal training. Interestingly, the speaking skills of the signing group developed more rapidly than those of the group given verbal training. This gap continued to grow over time. By the age of 2, the verbal skills of the signers were 3 months ahead of those of the non-signers. Afterwards, the two groups grew closer in terms of ability, but the signers remained more advanced up to the age of 3. The results suggest that sign language has the potential to be used in early infant education. It can also help parents communicate more effectively with their infants, allowing them to better understand and respond to their needs. 4.
Data spills occur when personal information you enter online is inadvertently exposed to a third party. Sometimes this is caused by an error on the website where you originally entered the information. For example, a charity once mistakenly made a list of its donors' home addresses available on its website. This is a serious error, but smaller data spills can also be caused by something as simple as a careless URL. Imagine you are online looking for information on English classes, and you fill out a form with personal data such as your name and age. The website might then assign that page a specific URL that includes this information. Others viewing this URL would then have access to your personal data without your permission.
Mini-test 5. 1. The Man in the Iron Mask is a fictional character in books and films, but he was also a real person. King Louis XIV of France had him imprisoned during the 17th century. His true identity is unknown because he was forced to wear a mask, which was actually made of black velvet, not iron. The first record of the prisoner comes from a letter written in 1669, which instructed the head of the prison to keep him in a cell with multiple doors in order to make sure he could not be heard. The prisoner himself was warned that he would be killed if he spoke to anyone unnecessarily. The head of the prison was the only person allowed to interact with the prisoner, but he visited him only to bring meals. When the prisoner finally died in 1703, all his possessions were destroyed to ensure nobody would ever know who he was. 2.
In 1887, Polish physician L. L. Zamenhof published a book titled International Language, Forward and Complete Textbook. This book marked the beginning of a new artificial language known as Esperanto. The purpose of Esperanto was not to replace any other language. Rather, it was created as a second language to improve communication between people of different lands and cultures. Today, there are several million speakers of this language around the world, making it by far the most popular artificial language.
3. When you use a tool, your brain thinks of it as an actual extension of your body. For example, one experiment demonstrated that after performing tasks with a long mechanical grabber, people behaved as if their arm were longer. This may seem strange, but it's a phenomenon you experience each day. When you brushed your teeth this morning, you didn't have to look at your mouth or your arm because your brain has fully incorporated the idea of the toothbrush with that of your arm. Consequently, if you were to change toothbrushes, you might find the task of brushing more difficult. This is because it would take your brain a moment to process the new tool's characteristics. 4.
Pamukkale is an amazing natural site located in southwestern Turkey. Its name means cotton castle in Turkish, and it is home to numerous hot springs and travertine terraces made up of minerals left behind by the flowing water. This phenomenon began when earthquakes created fractures in the ground thousands of years ago. Powerful underground hot springs rose up through these cracks, bringing mineral-rich water to the Earth's surface. When this water evaporated, it left behind calcium carbonate that slowly built up in layers, like stalactites in a cave. A town called Hierapolis, meaning Holy City, was later built above this site by the Greeks, who believed the milky waters had healing powers. Pamukkale is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and its pools have been partly closed off to prevent damage.
Mini-test 6. 1. In 1941, Disney made Dumbo, a short animated film about a baby elephant who could use his giant ears to fly. The movie was made at an important time for the company. Disney had wanted its last animated film, Fantasia, to become a yearly series. However, Fantasia did not become popular and was rather a very expensive failure. As a result, Disney decided to make Dumbo to recover some of the losses. Dumbo, based on a short story, was made simply and inexpensively. At 64 minutes, the film was one of Disney's shortest animated features. Without a large budget, the animators didn't need to spend much time on detailed backgrounds. Instead, the acting became central to the film, and the animators focused on making the characters appealing. Today, Dumbo is recognized as an outstanding example of American animation. Two.
Stamped bottle stoppers from Mesopotamia may be the oldest evidence of product branding ever found. At first, rural Mesopotamians made food and drinks, and they traded these goods directly with others. There were no problems because people knew the producers personally. Yet, as rural villages transformed into big cities, the origins of products became harder to determine. This is when personalized stone seals to mark the producers of food and drink were created. Their role was to let consumers know they were getting products of high quality. Gradually, the stamps of skilled producers became recognizable, and the concept of product branding was born.
Three. When people get angry and behave rudely on a passenger airplane, it is known as air rage. Unlike in similar situations that occur on land, dealing with air rage can be extremely problematic. In flight, airplanes travel at altitudes where the air pressure can affect people's mental state. This becomes worse when they are under the influence of medication or alcohol, sometimes causing them to behave violently. Unfortunately, the airplane's crew can't ask the offending passenger to leave, and an emergency landing is seldom a practical solution. Furthermore, there is generally insufficient space to hold an angry passenger in isolation until the plane reaches its destination. Four.
Most people are aware that to live a long, healthy life, they need to exercise regularly and maintain a moderate, balanced diet. Recent findings, however, suggest that sustaining mental fitness and having a conscientious personality can help people overcome or at least fight serious physical illnesses. Thousands of terminally ill people from around the world were analyzed according to their personality traits. The key trait that helped some of these people live longer than others was found to be conscientiousness. This means being organized, focused, and motivated to achieve one's goals. Other factors that played a role were ambition and discipline, both of which are sub-factors of conscientiousness.
Mini-test 7. 1. Some scientists say that the urine we flush away every day could be used to generate new brain cells. According to a new study, this waste can create cells that could possibly help scientists study diseases related to the loss of nerve cells. These recycled urine cells could also help doctors treat certain brain diseases, such as Alzheimer's. In addition, creating cells from urine could allow scientists to avoid the controversial issue of embryonic stem cell research altogether. Also, unlike embryonic stem cells, which have a high risk of developing tumors, urine-derived cells are not likely to develop tumors. This makes using urine to develop cells safer. Plus, urine is more available and easier to access than other sources such as blood or skin samples. Two.
A common conception of retired seniors is that they sit on porches in rocking chairs, wasting away day by day. But for the majority of older people, retirement is a time of personal growth and activity. Many retirees use their savings and newfound free time to pursue lifelong interests that they were forced to set aside in the past due to more immediate obligations. Retirees are enhancing their notion of self, embracing new technologies and trends, and incorporating them into their daily lives. In short, retirement is being seen as just another life transition rather than the end of a journey.
3 through 5. One Friday during freshman year, I noticed a classmate named Jason carrying an armload of books across the campus parking lot. It was a sight that caught my attention. He must have been holding every single one of his books. I watched him, intrigued. But then, a group of tough guys spotted him and began pushing him around. They didn't stop until the kid had dropped all of his belongings and was scrambling to collect the scattered books. I ran over to him and saw that he had tears in his eyes. We chatted as I helped him pick up his books, and as it turned out he lived near my house. We walked home together. That chance meeting turned into a close friendship. Over the years, we became best friends and Jason grew more confident, more attractive, and excelled in school. By the time graduation rolled around, he had earned the position of school valedictorian. On the day of our graduation, I beamed with pride as Jason took the stage to deliver his speech to the school. He cleared his throat, shot a glance at me, and smiled. "Graduation," he began, his eyes fixed on me, "is a time for thanking people who got you to where you are today. Your teachers, your parents, and especially your friends." I listened in disbelief as he recounted the story of when we met, how he had planned to kill himself that weekend, and how he was carrying home the contents of his locker so his mom wouldn't have to later. "But that's when I met him," he said, smiling at me, "and I was saved. The kindness of a friend is the reason I'm here today." Mini Test 8. 1. When we got to the city, we learned that an annual culture festival would be taking place during our stay. At first, I was afraid this would create chaos and ruin the plans we'd made, but I was completely wrong. While the city's old pedestrian streets would be fun to explore any time, during the festival they were filled with performing singers, dancers, and actors. We snapped photos and chatted pleasantly, constantly surrounded by visitors from all over the world. At night, lots of bands put on quite a show at the main stage, and we stayed up into the early hours with all our new friends. 2.
It seems that bullying is no longer merely a playground phenomenon. Over half of all adolescents say they've been bullied by peers on the internet. 40% say they've experienced such harassment more than once. Some people think this is no big deal, pointing out that kids have always teased one another. But there have been many cases recently in which young people have been so upset by cyberbullying that they've committed suicide. Countless others suffer from psychological problems and feelings of isolation due to mistreatment online. While cyberbullying will probably never go away, it's necessary to try to prevent it by teaching online manners.
3. The mathematician Kurt Gödel was born in what is now the Czech Republic. He is known mostly for elaborating on Einstein's theory of general relativity, but Gödel also did a lot of scientific and philosophical work, such as the incompleteness theorem, which has far-reaching implications for mathematics and computer science. When young, Gödel was a shy and sickly boy. When he was 8, he had rheumatic fever. Though it did not cause lasting physical damage, it kept him at home for quite a long time. This may also have contributed to his increasing concern for his health over the years. Later, he even developed an obsessive fear of being poisoned. Because of this, he would only eat food made by his wife, Adele. Unfortunately, when she was hospitalized for 6 months in 1977, Gödel refused to eat and eventually starved to death. 4.
An aunt of mine often says, "Youth is wasted on the young." This statement has stirred my curiosity for years. People usually smile when she says it, and I have always smiled too. But I think I'm just now beginning to understand the meaning of the saying. I believe it is similar to a statement Thornton Wilder made in his play Our Town. Toward the end of the play, Emily, one of the main characters, says, "I didn't realize that so much was going on and we never noticed." Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it, every minute? Older people, looking back, can value youth, its real meaning and its importance. But young people, while they are in the middle of youth, never fully realize what they have.
Mini Test 9. 1. When considering the causes of road rage, we must remember that human beings are territorial. We protect our personal space and act aggressively when others invade it. Our car, and the area immediately surrounding it, is an extension of our personal space. If another vehicle invades this territory by cutting us off, we take steps to defend ourselves. Such an attempt may include flashing our headlights or sounding our horn to chase off the invader. However, sometimes this is not enough to communicate our irritation. Therefore, we may resort to nonverbal communication, like offensive hand gestures, to express our contempt for the invading driver. Some call this road rage, but it's simply an instinctual reaction. 2.
Some German researchers wanted to know how human-made noises, especially traffic sounds, affect the communication of bow-winged grasshoppers. To find out, they captured almost 200 male grasshoppers, half from quiet places and the other half from roadsides. They then placed the grasshoppers in a laboratory along with a female grasshopper and recorded their courtship songs. After analyzing the recordings, the experts determined that the songs from the two groups of grasshoppers were, in fact, quite different. Both groups of bow-winged grasshoppers produced songs with both high and low sounds. However, the grasshoppers from the roadsides made the low frequencies much louder than the other grasshoppers did. In other words, the male grasshoppers had adapted to their noisy environment by altering their tunes. The researchers concluded that this behavior allows females to hear the calls over the loud sounds of traffic.
3 and 4. Most people take it for granted that home-cooked food is healthier than ready-made meals that can be purchased at grocery stores. Thus, no one has ever thought about the nutritional impact of recipes from the famous cookbooks. However, one new study published by BMJ, the British Medical Journal, might surprise people who work hard to eat healthy, fresh ingredients and avoid ready-made meals. Researchers compared the nutrition of 100 recipes in famous cookbooks with that of 100 popular ready-made meals. According to the findings, neither the recipes nor the packaged meals provided a balanced diet. However, in several ways, the ready-made meals were actually healthier than the recipes. The recipes had much more fat per serving than the packaged meals, and they also contained less fiber. This means that if these home-cooked meals were packaged, a warning label would be put on them. In other words, they are as dangerous as instant food with warning labels in the supermarket. Therefore, it seems strange that no one has complained about TV chefs cooking during the time when children enjoy watching TV, while many people propose that companies should not advertise unhealthy food on TV during the same time. The researchers now suggest that warning labels and nutrition information be provided with the chef's recipes on TV, on websites, and in cookbooks. Mini Test 10. 1. Some people suffer from what are known as circadian rhythm sleep disorders. When allowed to fall asleep and wake up according to the natural schedule of their body clocks, they enjoy a normal quality of sleep. Yet, when forced to conform to a schedule of work or school that is imposed on them by society, these people experience serious problems with their sleep. Like everyone else, their bodies have natural biological rhythms called circadian rhythms, which control their daily biological clocks. Unfortunately, their clocks are not set the same as most people's. Due to this difference, they experience sleepiness and wakefulness at different times from the rest of society. 2.
Imagine you've done something wrong at school. You know your parents are very angry and waiting for you to come home. At the end of the school day, you might say to your friends, "It's time to go home and face the music." So what does face the music mean, and what are its origins? It is believed that this expression comes from the military. In the past, when a soldier was kicked out of the army for doing something bad, he would be walked out of the camp by an officer. His fellow soldiers would gather to watch this shameful ceremony, and a drummer would play a slow beat. This was the music he had to face. In other words, face the music means to accept an inevitable punishment. These days, the expression can refer to accepting the unpleasant consequences for your behavior in any situation.
3. The government has announced new policies to support current adoptive parents and encourage others to take an orphaned child into their home. Potential adoptive parents will now play a greater role in choosing a child and will also receive the same maternity and paternity leave as biological parents. What's more, special activity days will be held to give these couples a chance to interact with children available for adoption. In an effort to make the transition smoother, new adoptive parents will also be given time off from work to spend more time with their new child. The government hopes these changes will increase the number of adoptions nationwide and make it easier for these new families to thrive. 4.
Negative pressure refers to a situation in which the pressure of an enclosed area is lower than that of the surrounding area. If the barrier between these two areas breaks, any substances in the high-pressure area will immediately flow into the negative pressure area. For example, undersea pipes used to transport oil are in a state of negative pressure. Therefore, any break in the pipeline will cause it to fill with ocean water. This is preferable to the opposite scenario, in which oil would be released into the ocean. However, negative pressure is not always beneficial, such as in the case of pipes carrying drinking water to a city. If these municipal water lines are damaged, they can potentially suck in contaminated groundwater, which would then enter the water supply. For this reason, a system of gauges and valves is used to adjust and control their pressure.
Mini Test 11. 1. I looked at the kitchen floor and watched water coming through the cracks between the boards. I ran to the window and threw back the curtains. The clouds had lifted, but where was my farm? There was no longer any land. The rushing flood had covered everything. Meanwhile, the water continued flowing into the kitchen, rising every minute like a bathtub filling up. Then there was a loud crash as the door burst open and the water came towards me. I raced for the stairs as the lights went out. 2.
At first sight, Mars does not appear very welcoming to life. It has very little oxygen and water, and the temperature at night is minus 50 degrees Celsius. However, it is believed that there is enough ice at the poles to cover the planet with water if it melted. Although there is no life on Mars now, some scientists think that Mars was once similar to Earth, where life exists. They also believe that Mars could support life in the future if the right conditions were created. The first step would be to find a way to heat up the planet's atmosphere. With warmth and water, simple plants could begin to grow. These plants could slowly make it possible to live on the surface of Mars. Although the whole process might take more than 100,000 years, people wouldn't have to wait that long to live there. By building special glass-covered structures to stay in, people could begin living on the planet in the next century.
Three through 5. Several decades ago, a group of young male poets, novelists, and essayists at the University of Wisconsin imagined that they could become the next great American writers. They formed a club and began holding meetings where they critiqued each other's work, never holding back or toning down their meanest comments. Their criticism was actually so harsh that even they began to refer to themselves as the Stranglers. Having heard about them, a group of women writers on the University of Wisconsin campus formed a literary circle of their own. They decided to call their group the Wranglers, and like their male counterparts, they shared their writing and listened to suggestions. But there was one important difference. They did not focus on criticism. Rather, they were supportive of fellow Wranglers. Sometime later, after the Wranglers and Stranglers had left the university, an alumnus studying the careers of Wisconsin graduates made an interesting discovery. Not a single one of the bright young people in the Stranglers had made any sort of relevant literary contribution in life. But the Wranglers had produced several important writers, like the award-winning author Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, who wrote The Yearling. It might not be fair to suggest that they simply had more talent and that this is the key difference accounting for their later success. Instead, it is more likely that the eventual achievements of the two groups were influenced by the environment in which the members got their start. The Stranglers fueled self-doubt, while the Wranglers fostered self-confidence. Mini-Test 12. 1. I'm a coach of a youth basketball team made up of players under 18 years of age. Recently, I was shocked to read an article in which an official from another youth team admitted that not all of their players were actually under 18. It's disappointing enough that this team, and possibly others, has been winning games by breaking the rules. But more importantly, it's the young players themselves that are suffering. Youth teams are designed to help develop promising young athletes into professional basketball players. It's a shame that this goal is being compromised by dishonest officials hoping to win more games. Strong steps must be taken to stop this kind of cheating as soon as possible. 2.
Information has changed. In the past, facts were debated. Today, they are easily available. For example, at a party decades ago, you might have argued about whether leopards live in Asia or not. Everyone would have had an opinion, and the discussion would have gone on and on. But with the internet, almost all questions can be answered in minutes. You simply hurry home, look up the information, and call your friends to say that you were right. And if you want the information right away, there's no reason why you shouldn't have it. Just take out your smartphone and look it up without leaving the party. The power of modern technology makes it possible to find whatever we need to know whenever we want.
3. When our ears hear a threatening sound approaching us, our brains make us believe that the source of the sound will reach us sooner than it actually will. In this way, our brains give us extra time to decide to escape if a threat is coming our way. Recently, however, researchers have discovered that the length of the escape time our brains provide depends on our physical fitness. The weaker we are, the longer our escape time. When we are threatened by approaching danger, those with weaker bodies rely more on escape to survive. Therefore, their brains encourage them to flee sooner. 4.
Electric eels are not really eels. In fact, they are much more like carp or catfish. They inhabit rivers such as South America's Amazon and Orinoco. They eat fish, amphibians, and sometimes even small birds. Electric eels are so named because their bodies generate a large amount of electricity, which they use to stun prey. Their bodies have electric organs with around 6,000 cells called electrocytes that act like tiny batteries to store energy. When electric eels attack, the cells release at least 600 volts of electricity. Electric eels also use their electrocytes to navigate. Since they have bad eyesight, they release a low charge of less than 10 volts that is a sort of natural radar system. Luckily for us, electric eels rarely kill people. But a person